Buenas noches, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well, blessed, and enjoying family. As always, muchas gracias to everyone for everyone's words, wishes, prayers, as the love and support everyone shares with me. From the heart, thank you. Also, do please like, share, subscribe, and hype to this video to help support the message. Thank you. Well, everyone, getting into the topic of today. Today, I'm gonna try to answer a couple questions. I got asked numerous of times to touch on the camarada silent from Walnut, and then also asked who's been one of my best cellies, right? Which is the homie was one of the best cellies I had. He was younger than myself, but he was a good individual. And anyways, and it's also gonna circle a little bit around Lalo and his ways, right? But anyways, I'll take you back to Corcoran. This is towards the end of 2003. Yeah, around the end or the middle, somewhere there, 2003, right? And not been very long since I had got into Corcoran and we were in three, right? We're in B section. As I mentioned before, I was originally downstairs, but that incident happened with Osito and Shadow from third, and then I would get moved upstairs, right? My celly would end up getting out the shoe, and then the homie would drive up, right? And the minute we found out he was a camarada, then I moved him in, which was the homie, Silent from Walnut. Again, he was younger than myself. He wasn't into the politics at all, you know. He understood it's a must in our structure, but other than that, he was more about the program, right? To program, and he was a lifer, you know, as myself at the time, and we got along pretty cool inside, Even though I had a lot of responsibilities, we got along pretty firmes, and to answer, Silent was one of the best artists I met in the system, When we were cellies, he did some drawings that, man, you know, I give him a lot of credit because, in the shoe, we only got them fillers and we had to make the barrel for the pen, right? And used to make some tough drawings off his head. He had a good imagination, to go off. But anyways, when we're there together, there was still group yard, A and B section, we would go out to the group yard, to the concrete yard, and then do what we always do in the shoe, right? Which is do a rutina, and then just afterwards, just check biceps, exchange whatever we need to exchange, and just kick it, chill. It was pretty chill. There was nothing really strict. Again, him being my celly, he knew that I was in charge of A side, right? Of the shoe. And even though Shadow from third, he was representing B section and termite A section, he knew I was behind the scenes, right? So a lot of questions came into play, like he was curious, which is understandable, right? And he started telling me a story, right? That he was coming from Centinela, and in Centinela there was war, right, with the brothers, and he was back there in the shoe because of that. And anyways, in Centinela, there was an individual plugged in from Lomas, Snake from Lomas, right? Which, if you were around long enough, that name should sound familiar, right? He was he was involved. His name was circled around a lot, especially in the time Lalo was still around. But anyways, I would ask him like, "What's up with homeboy though? Why you asking me?" And basically, I guess Snake had a liking to him and had tried to plug him in a couple times with Lalo, right? And he had a number, a directa to contact and everything. And I just told him, I told him, look, homie, the best advice I could give you is don't get involved, And I didn't do it to minimize our walk as campoleros, right? It was just, he was young. And even though he's a lifer, I could totally understand his mentality, right? To keep his name relevant. If he starts mixing inside with a Pili, his name will stay relevant on the streets with his neighborhood, right? Because unlike a lot of people believe, time keeps moving, generations pass by, and your name keeps being forgotten, you know. But anyways, I would end up telling him that, like a consejo. It was never like, hey, nah, don't do it. Nah, it's your decision, homie. And you know, just if you do so, expect this, and that. And if you're willing to go through them sacrifices, right? Then go ahead and strike that director and see what he replies. If your name already got sent up there with Lalo and good word, then everything should be firme, right? And so, anyways, we're in the cell and time goes by, right? And on the yard, on the concrete yard, at this time, there was a homie, Toro. He was he was from SGV, I believe Eastside Dukes or something like that, right? But he was from SGV. He had been there even before myself, you know. So he was a quiet one, real quiet. And whenever he did speak, though, he was always that one person that tried to impress, Oh, I'm in touch with so and so. I did this over here. I had this, and it's things you don't tell it if you're not asked, or if you're not aware of who the vato is. He could be a camarada. His paperwork get clear, but you still don't put your business out there, It's just, anyways, you know, he was under Lalo and Terco at one point. I don't know how he worked that out, but whatever it is, he got mad at me because his homework was in Ironwood, for over 10 years, and he had funny paperwork. He had them charges on his jacket, and he had a pass per se, and I worked around it to have him removed, right? Pato from Isa Duarte, and when he introduced himself and I seen his estilo, I told him like, yeah, I was over here, you're home with Pato, and he got real happy, like, yeah, Simon, cool. I was the one, and he stayed serio, and I did it on purpose. It was to hit him upside the head, like, hey, you know, I really don't care what you're doing. It's none of my business. But anyways, other than that, he was quiet. Silent would end up striking up Lalo's, yeah, or his people on the street, right? And he would tell him straight up, aquí estoy in Corcoran. I'm doing time for a pegada. Whatever, once I get out, I would like to establish something for you. However he went about it, right? The things we tell the Billies back then, right? And of course, you're gonna pick up their attention. All you gotta do is just that, right? Hey, I'm so and so. I know you heard my name from so and so. Hey, I'm doing a little shoot term. When I get out, I would like the opportunity to represent you. Grab a seat under your name and start showing you love and respect, money wise, holly wise, right? And believe me, Lalo wasn't going to say no, right? But in the stay back there, you know, like him or dislike them, whatever, I was there supporting Artie. Everything there was Artie's. Even though there was other Billies there, there had already been an issue, like I stated before, with Osito and Shadow in the cell and Terco getting in, through the shadows. And I had already answered up for that one. Well, I never respected it from the homie, because he always looked for advice. But that's the whole thing, the individual addressing him, or he was responding back and forth with, told him, hey, if you know who has the yard there, this is one of the missions, right? Where you show loyalty and all that brainwash, right? That only, sorry I say it like that, but camaradas that haven't really been involved would fall for, right? Because if you have some glitches like, oh, I ain't going to disrespect another Billy's house, just common sense, it's going to be my butt. And that other Billy that sends me on that mission, he's going to backtrack and he's going to say, I don't know what he's talking about. You hold on to that appeal to prove that you got older, it's considered you telling. You're washed up regardless. So it's part of politics how they pinpoint things for you to do, and at the same time is you're doomed if you do it, you're doomed if you don't, you know. And if you do it trying to cover yourself by saving the kites, where everything's being said and you're being asked and everything to cover your butt, then all of a sudden it becomes why you holding on to kites. You know, the orders are real simple. You get, you read, you rip, you flush. You know, you keep them long, then on next thing you know, it's like they start accusing camaradas of you're saving them from for the squad. You know, which in a lot of cases, a lot of cats were doing that. So, anyways, we would go out to a group yard like nothing, and just that morning, I had asked him like, "Hey, silent, todo bien?" Because I have noticed, when you live with a person, you tend to know the mood swings, right? The changes. And I seen him like thoughtful a lot. And I told him, "Hey, todo bien? Hey, todo bien con allá? I don't need to know your business, but everything's good over there." And it's exactly what I had told him in the beginning. You got to be ready for them trying to get in your head, and you got to always remember, well, at least back then, as a sureño, you have word, you have the right to ask. For example, in this case, his options, the best thing was don't show the kites, don't deny you're not gonna do it, but do address it to the house. Like, hey, so and so is wanted by the building I'm writing to, Lalo, and he's requesting something of me to get done. Me as being under him, I gotta complete what he's asking. So, I'm just giving you awareness out of respect. Me personally, I was nobody. I couldn't stop a camarada not to do it, right? Especially if I did so, I would be considered going against the green with Lalo. You know, in that case, don't matter how much you want to stick for a camarada. At the end of the day, it's like, homie, you do what you have to. It just comes back to what I'm speaking on. Not knowing the outcomes, especially if you've never really been involved, right? But anyways, before yard, I would not know none of this. We went out to yard. We did a rutina. There was a shower head out there, right? So we all take turns showering. When this vato from Duarte jumps in the shower, excuse me, Silent goes over there like he's gonna drink water, and he starts whacking this fool. He starts going to town. So, the first thing, as a sureño, you get used to it, from being in 180s, alarm hits, you don't get down. You always look around and see what's happening, right? Because sometimes something's wrong is happening. It don't matter if you're amongst camaradas, you to jump in. And anyways, I seen that, and the mind right away clicked, like, man, they okey doke the homie, right? And anyways, he would take care of business. That vato from Duarte, he owed a debt. A debt that you would consider not even being a debt, a paper of 50. I know you can't allow people to owe you. I understand that. It will never be allowed, but you start reflecting on, this is a youngster. And if he ever had a date, you just put him in the spot, right? And you could tell he's not being looked at seriously because instead of waiting for him to get out the shoe and grab a seat, he's being utilized to whack someone for a 50 paper. Not only that, but keep it in the shadows from the Billy that that house belongs to and everyone else. Anyways, when you know we came back in the cell and he just said told me, I dispense, and I told him, hey, homie, you don't gotta tell me anything. I ain't nobody, homie. You know, we talked. I told you how things are run, how you gotta stay ahead of certain things. This was definitely one of them. My responsibility is just what happened, to hear you out, besides what, and report it. And then from there, I got no say so in what they say. If it comes back to remove you, then that's what's gonna happen. You know, and I dispenser, he knew, I really liked the individual, but it is what it is. Like I said, you can like and get along real good, but when it's time to boogie, there is just no option. It's time to go. But fortunately for the homie, I got at Indio about this, and I told him, and Indio actually took his time to write Raul Lalo's people, and Lalo put salsa on it. Like it went from a 50 paper to 5 grams, and it just he was basically coming up. He could have thrown the homie under the bus, so thank you God for that. He just put salsa on it, and told him he owed me 5 grams, and I didn't have your directa to get at you directly, so the homie took care of it for me, and he told Indio, I les encargo el homie, so he got a pass per se. Next jale that needed to get handled, Silent was the first one that was gonna do it, and it's just that little ladder. He went from not being involved to putting trust in a Pili that he was recommended to by someone he was close to on a yard, and the Pili just buried him. Cause okay, he was already there for a stabbing. He caught a stabbing. Next time that a stabbing needed to get done, he was going to handle it. By the third one, I give 100% squat was going to be on you to validate you. So there went another lifer that was going to sit down, period, point blank, right? And go through the heartaches. And for those that know, Lalo had a lot of people against him. He wasn't the correct Billy to have all this fall on you behind. But I didn't see it how it played out. Right after this is when Squad came, and they all opened the door. They rushed up in there. They grabbed me because of termite. They took me down. They did the whole little 10 yards they do, took pictures of my tattoos. And that's when they hit me with the second validation because I just beat my first one, right? And they would end up moving me from that cell and sending me to B yard, you know. And how it works usually is when things like that happen, your cell is the one that takes over, you know. But I had strict orders that nah, they didn't want nobody under Lalo there. So Shadow took over, and to be sincere, I would not know what would end up happening with the homie. And just recently, I heard he would eventually get out. You know, he would get out, and unfortunately, he would get killed on the streets. I don't know behind what or what. I don't know the circumstances of him getting out. I know he got busted real young, and I know at one point he was on AR politicking tough. He went from being a level-headed camarada just with the program, and it just took for him to get in touch with the Pili to really mess up his whole program in the system. And don't get me wrong, I was that idiot where it was a must, but I was also one that could see a good camarada, and there was no need to have him struggle, have him sit down permanently with us just to be shined, because that's exactly what was going to happen. Lalo made a lot of enemies, so wherever he was going to land, it was like, hey, I'm under Lalo. Oh, really? Hey, that homie right there, he's good, but keep him away from the needs to know what's going on in the Casa Lalo. And it's the error that a lot of camaradas make. A lot more now. You tend to see a lot of youngsters that go in, and since they walk the yarda now, of course, the Pili is going to take advantage of that. They're there for a reason. And if they could hook you to get you to promise whatever it may be, you getting out, lace up your neighborhood, or start bringing things in, or do a jale for them, whatever it may be, they're gonna do it. But the insight on this one is just that. I know it's part of the causa. It's a lot of people say it's what we're meant for, and it's true. I always said it. If you're there already, boogie, to the fullest. Lace up, boot up, and vámonos. Till you can't no more, right? Never sidestep, never backtrack. But also, it would be great, at least in the sense of clecha. There's a lot of individuals with good clecha that could really, without putting negativity out there in people's ears, can open eyes on what homies are really getting into. You see, we're going with the speed, and I include myself. We get busted, and we're going with the speed. I want to do this. I need to do this, and everything that I was that individual, everything that came up, I'll do it. I'll do it. And if it weren't for Raul, right, I don't know what I would be. That's how they should be camaradas. You know, I'm not on your spit poison or separation. You know, the ladder is what the ladder is of the causa. But you know, remember that individual next to you. If he's doing everything right, he's the one that's gonna be defending your back in times of war. So it's always good to have his back. But anyways, mi gente, that's the end look. Hope I made sense. With this said, my love and prayers. Please stay true to yourself and loyal to loved ones. Buenas noches.